Okay, welcome everybody. Hello.
Yes, yes. Welcome. We are back. We are
In
finally back.
action. We had a
Yes.
little hiatus
Yeah.
or a big hiatus.
Yeah. A
We
long
actually took a
hiatus.
year off. Like that year went by so fast, but the pandemic kind of like interrupted the flow a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but we are back and we are happy that we are back. So I am Tezra.
And I am Koa.
And this is I Am Not That podcast.
Liberating the self from the self.
So we have our social handles. It is
I Am Not That podcast. So it's I Am Not That _ podcast on Instagram, and then everything else you can just look up I Am Not That podcast. YouTube, Facebook, yeah, Twitter.
So, all right. Y'all, we have a powerhouse in the building. So and I'm so excited to have her as our first, as we relaunch and come out of this hiatus, because she is all about like power and knowing that inner confidence and letting that drive you and kind of like building your life from that place. So I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Jeanette Brown, and she is the founder and president of the PR firm Excellence and Presence Communications. And she's had this since 1999. Like, y'all, she's a real entrepreneur. Like, she got some history behind her. And so she hails all the way from Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yes.
Brooklyn, let's go.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
welcome.
Thank you.
So let's get started. I wanted to read a little bit more of your background, but perhaps you can just tell us.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll jump right in. So one small nuance is I actually started my company in 2017. I've been in public relations and marketing since '99.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So which is very much part of my journey. So started in a public relations agency in 1999, and there was only one computer in the office that had the internet. And the way that we communicated with the media was faxing and phone calls. So like the skill set that's required today that people use over email when communicating, and the resources of getting online and just Googling something, I was using the fax machine, the phone, and Atlas to determine a major market if we had an event somewhere, and books to look through to find media contacts for people to pitch. So here I am, right? 20 years later, and back to the point you mentioned about inner power and confidence. In 2017, I had a life-changing moment where I had my second son. I gave birth to my second son, and I was, at the time, felt like I was at the peak of my career, and a vice president at a leading agency. And things changed after I had my son, and then I was laid off, and I kind of took a step back and wasn't feeling the best. But that time where I was forced to sit down and like be with myself and my thoughts, as opposed to jet setting and going here and there and doing the things that people thought were glamorous, was the moment where I realized that there was a lot that I had to deal with and look within for. So I'm really glad to be here and have an opportunity to talk about that specifically, because not many people have that opportunity or the realization, right?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we're going to just start from the beginning.
Okay.
Humble beginnings. So I've heard you kind of describe this in other podcasts, but like your upbringing, like you were brought up in a very diverse neighborhood in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And all the kind of like just came together. Oh my gosh, how lucky are you? So can you kind of just take us back to your childhood and also share any spiritual practices or rituals that your family was into that may have rubbed off on you?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and it was a very diverse neighborhood, and combination of Hispanic, Caribbean, and it really felt, now in retrospect, it was like a celebration of cultures and life and experiences. That is what was happening internally if you lived there. Externally, people saw that neighborhood as as crime ridden, and someplace like I've even heard people like, you shouldn't tell people you live in Brooklyn, right? And I'm thinking, why? Like, what's so bad? But I grew up in the 80s, and we all know what was happening in the country in the 80s, and graffiti on the
Right.
walls and the subways. And today it's art, right? Today they're walking tours through the neighborhood that I grew up in, where I'm actually taking pictures in front of murals today and celebrating that graffiti, because people are actually profiting off of self-expression, the self-expression that was back then. That's what
Tabooed.
it is today. Yes, today. So it was a great experience. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to high school, and to ninth grade. And so I grew up in a religious household, went to Catholic school, and then as I got older, my parents were involved in Pentecostal church. So a lot of praying, Bible reading. I even volunteered. My first job was volunteering at the church and picking children up on Saturdays and taking them to Bible study. So a lot of religion.
You're on Clubhouse, right?
Yes, I do. I do get on Clubhouse.
Because my husband calls it the crack house.
Yep.
Oh God, I have these visions that pop into my head.
From room to room all night long.
It is such a beautiful platform for all of these like-minded people to just come together. And in one of the rooms that I frequent, they talk about Azusa. Are you familiar with Azusa?
No, I'm not. I'm taking notes.
So it is, you said that your family was Pentecostal. And so the Azusa was is how the Pentecostal denomination came about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Pastor Seymour, yeah. And it was considered to be like the esoteric of the Christian faith. So
okay. Interesting.
yes, that's very interesting that you mentioned Pentecostal, because Pentecostals get down.
Yes. Yes, it's very much. My father sang in church, and I sang in church. He played a guitar. It was very much like the thing to do every Sunday, and Bible studies throughout the week. And my family is also from the Caribbean, so religion was kind of where our morality. I was raised as my morality was based, and values and life. So it transcended every aspect of life, and experiences that we encountered. And I'm thankful for it.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Of course. I was curious. Now, is that still like a current practice? Did you begin to integrate anything else? Was there like something that may be considered? Because sometimes they do spiritual versus religion, not versus like against each other, but just cross comparing like the differences. Is it the same for you, spiritual and your religious background? Or was there more?
No, I'm less. So as I raised my first son, who's now 23, I was less religious and spiritual, but very much grounded in prayer and teaching him, as well as my youngest child, that there's a higher power. Today, I am more spiritual than religious. Just because of the various experiences that I've had. And so I still believe that there is a higher power, but I also believe that we have power within ourselves.
All right, that's a good way. Mm-hmm. So I know that, talk to us a little bit about, the way that you dealt with your mom.
Passing away. Yeah, so it was, my mom passing away at 17 was really shocking, because I was away at college, upstate New York, and came home for holiday break, and she suddenly passed away. She was 42, she was young, and she didn't have any ailments. And one day she got sick, and she had like a scratch on her leg, and it turned into swelling of her leg, which then turned into a blood clot, which then traveled to her lungs, and she passed away from a pulmonary embolism. And I remember that evening, and thinking, just to give you a sense of like how unaware of something so serious she was, is that I remember the evening that she had passed away. She had come home from work sick. She's had a fever. She thought she had the flu. She was laying down in bed and sweating. And I remember like patting her head and saying, okay, mom, I guess you're going to be okay. And I actually went out that night. And when I came back home, she was gone, right? Like she had passed away. And she was having a heart attack the entire day and didn't know it. And back to living in Bushwick, Brooklyn, if you went to a local hospital, it was the idea of having to sit there all day and not get medical attention. She was just like, I'm going to push through this. I'll be fine. The ambulance even came to my house earlier that day, and she refused to go because it was New Year's Eve. And she didn't want to spend New Year's Eve in the hospital. Anyway, fast forward, it was shocking. And the way that I dealt with that was kind of leading into all the things that I was taught, going to school. So I ended up joining community college, getting a job, because now you're left to figure out how to take care of yourself. And those were the things that my mom and grandparents had drilled into me. And by this time at 17, I was 17 when she passed away. My grandparents had also died. So like they died at 13, then 14 and 17, my mom passed away. And these were all the people who were just like staples in my childhood. They helped to raise me. And my father was also around as well. But at that time, he was not in our home. And so we're just kind of left to figure things out. And I poured myself into work. So by the time I was 20, I had started at a PR agency and was going to school at night because I needed to continue to get my degree. And my career, I ended up staying there 8 years, and that is how my career developed. And the people there believed in me. And in retrospect, I looked at those individuals as family, like that innocence that I came along and grew up with. I looked up to the older people at the company, and even looked for acceptance and direction from my peers and supervisors.
So that is so much, right?
I know.
How do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile all of a sudden just finding yourself kind of all alone in the world? And I know you said you poured yourself into like your college, into work. Was that how you dealt with the grief of it? Or did you go through your grieving process at the same time while figuring out how am I going to traverse this world by myself?
No, that's how I dealt with it. I didn't realize until 2017 when I had to sit down with my second son and like figure out life and reflect on my experiences, I realized that is truly what I did. I pushed through it. My sister was older than me. She was having a really difficult time because she was the one who stayed at home and with my mother while I went away to college. So, and I was the one who was just like, I'm like, all right, well, I can't do that, right? Because we both can't be that upset about this. We need to, survive. And that's how I dealt with it.
Wow, you did much better than me. My mom passed, I was around 20, almost 21. And you poured yourself into work. I might have poured myself into anger, crime, like just really lashing out, just not really good at expressing feelings at all prior to that even taking place. So when that happened, it was like all I had was a bunch of stuff just waiting to come out in basically all the wrong ways. So luckily, my path has led me to where it is now, and all these things that shape us. But it sounds like you certainly rose to the challenge of grief and loss in a very productive and powerful way early on.
Yeah, and great segue, because I wanted to talk about that. Like, how do you rise in the face of challenges? And listening to other interviews that you've conducted, you seem like you've kind of always had this inner knowing of your inner power and strength. And you didn't I love that face, because if not really, then that gives us a path that you can like kind of take us to, and how to arrive at the point of being confident and finding the inner power.
Right. So I was not aware of my inner power. What I what I would always say I had in me was like a drive and motivation to do things. So I wasn't like the type of person to sit down and not explore new things. So kind of fearless in a way. Um, so there were things that I would do that like I find interest in random things, but I still poured myself into the thing that kept me, I guess, on track was having structure and consistency, and that's the role that a job played. And there were things along the way. This was a retrospective look, right? Was to along the way, I'd have things like gut feelings. I had no idea what PR was. I was temping, and I was handed a job that was a PR agency, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do this. I can make money and survive and go to school at night. And it was just like a feeling I had, or things that would come into my path that I stumbled into these areas. And I just so happened to be really good at communications, right? I just so happened to be motivated and be filled with determination that I remember getting my first PR project. I was hired as support staff, and I was given a project to work on. And I was told by my supervisor at the time that I did better than the people they had actually hired to do the job. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I got excited about what I was doing, and I continued to pour myself into it. But at no point did I understand what I know as power within today. I didn't know that that's what it was that I was tapping into all along. I looked at it as like motivation or driven, or my friends were like, oh, you're always doing something, right? And even if it wasn't the things that they wanted to do, I had different interests, and I wasn't afraid to explore them. And it excited me, right? It excited me to do different things. And that to me is your own personal power. And then the feeling I would get in my stomach, which you could like, oh, gut feeling, like, you know, even in work, people tell you like, what is that? Like, what is your gut feeling? That instinct is not tangible. So people who don't understand that you have personal power, that's not something you say. And and when I say people who don't understand, I'm talking about individuals who in the traditional structure of society are looked at as thought leaders and leaders in general. But the gut feeling comes out of very few people's mouths to say that is an instinct that they respond to. And that is something that I've always felt. That just, again, it was like, oh no, what is that? So when you talked about fitting into the norms of society, it wasn't something that you could talk about like, no, this is, and I'll give you a very concrete example. So part of my job is to come up with clever headlines and news stories and news angles. And, you know, you can sit in a room with a bunch of people and throw an idea out. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. You know, I really don't agree with that. And sometimes their perspective is what doesn't allow them to gravitate to the idea or think that it works. And I would follow up with, like, I'm telling you, I have a feeling, right? This is a good idea. And it would be, right? But it's not until someone else repeats it, and it's not tied to, oh, I have a feeling it's a good idea. They're like, oh, yeah, I guess that could work, right? But in my gut, I'm like, no, this is it. And that is the thing that I had to learn to harness as I progressed in my career.
Oh,
You know
wow.
what? I love that, because the gut feeling, I often call it the ant's whisper. And so when you learn to trust that, you know, like the world opens up for you, and you rarely make missteps when you really listen and trust, you know, the ant's whisper, because it's like really subtle, right? It's really subtle and in there. And I wanted to follow up with you, because some people are still trying to find out like what their purpose is, or, you know, what am I good at and what am I meant to do? And when you said that you were always very driven and motivated, and you're a great communicator, so it just kind of found you. So what would you say to people who are feeling like they are behind the rat race because they may not have necessarily they don't think that they have found it yet, as opposed to falling back and letting it come to them?
Okay, so I have two thoughts. One I'll share is how I stumbled upon mine, and I think that it's usually finding out that you have that internal power is usually found when you are alone. right? And which leads me to my second point about being alone. And I don't mean alone as in, oh, just sit quietly in a room. I mean, when you are at a point where you feel you're not feeling the best, and things are happening around you, because that's how life works, right? Some people are up and some people are down. But in that moment of being down and sad, that stillness forces you to think about things that you normally wouldn't. And on that like thought journey, and reflect, right? And usually focus on the thing that's making you most upset. Why did this happen? How could this have happened? What could I have done differently? And you find yourself going on a journey of where that misstep may have happened, and how did you feel in the moment when you made that misstep? Oh, I remember being so excited about it. I never could have thought that it would have gone that way. Sometime if you reflect, you'll remember, you'll think about a doubt or a feeling that you may have had, or a second guess, and you'll realize the moment where you went the wrong way. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, that journey is also there to help you find that power, right? That misstep is more a learning process than a mistake, and something you should regret, right? Like, no regrets. There's a lesson in everything, and that's why I said first being alone, because sometimes the influence of people and their opinions, even if these are people you respect, sometimes a person just hasn't walked in your shoes and they can't give you advice. And or don't know what it is that you should be doing, because it doesn't look like what they've done or what they think is the right thing to do. And then the second thing is, in what is that moment, the thing that you're most frustrated about, reflecting on that, and on that journey of how you got to that point is usually what you realize, you know what, I kind of had this idea, or you realize where you had an opportunity to go in an opposite direction, but you chose that, and you need to dig into why.
Thank you for that share. When you talked about having how low moments can really inspire you to find that inner power, find that voice, or start to, it becomes a little clearer because you're so down in the
Right.
dark. The light starts to shine through
Mhm.
in different ways and communicate to you. I'm curious, because I love the story so far that we're getting from you in terms of how your life has gone, and it's
Right.
uplifting, everything like that. I want to like get into the mud, into the what are some of these low moments, or maybe, besides your mom passing, what's a time when it's really been like, usually I'm on top of the world kind of thing, but I'm really just hitting the wall right now emotionally, or whatever, some kind of things are happening that are challenging. What were some of your more
Okay.
challenging?
So some of my most challenging moments, that they're usually the things that you really don't want to talk about, but people that know you know that they've happened. So, but some of my low moments were the breakup from my first son's father. We were together for 13 years, and I thought we'd be together forever. And it was a really difficult time in my life. And even in that moment, I didn't understand. I didn't understand the impact of that relationship on my life. I'm still friends with him today. So it was more about the moment and having to grow, both of us having to grow from that moment in time, and moving on. That was, it was hard. So nothing has felt it like internally, like pain in my heart as much as it did when my mom passed away. But that was like the follow-up, right? That was like the next, and he knew my mother also. So I felt like this was someone who, I don't know, knows me, but it just wasn't a good situation. I continued to grow in another direction, and he did as well. So that was one of the low moments. The next was in 2017, after thinking that, I had one of the most, I was at a great place in life. I had, thrived through challenging situations, and continued to raise through the ranks in my career. And I was not employed. And 2 months after I had my son, I was laid off. And it just became a moment where I was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive? And I had all these plans that I wanted to, and everything had to come to a screeching halt. I also found myself like I wasn't working long. I had not worked so long that like my unemployment had run out. I spent all the money that I'd saved in the 20 years of my life of working professionally, like 18 years at that time, working professionally. And I looked around and realized that all the help that I'd handed out throughout the years, all the showing up and pouring into others, that wasn't being reciprocated. And that was a very low point for me. And the pivotal moment that reminded me that like if you like Jeanette, what's your problem? Is I was contacted by my first boss who wrote a book, and in his book he wrote about me, and he sent me a message on LinkedIn. And I'm home. I think at this time my son is like 6 or 8 months, and he's like, hey, you should check out my new book. I included you in it. I hadn't seen, this is 2017. I hadn't seen this man since 2005, 2006, and probably hadn't talked to him since then as well. And that when he said that he wrote about me in his book, it was one line, and it talked about being a great person to work with. It was about his career as like a journalist, and then being a pioneer in sports PR. And he talked about his experience in the company that he created and the people he worked with. And he mentioned me as being one of the nicest people, and being proud of me because I was 20 when I started. And so I was young, one of the youngest people there. And that today I was, he said that I was a leading executive at a PR agency. And I was like, wow. Like what? Like how many years has passed? How many people? This is someone who met legends in the world, right? Like Muhammad Ali, Taylor, like global legends. I'm like, you're thinking about me? Like, so it just reminded me of the power of the impression that you leave with someone, or how impactful your encounters can be. And this is not someone who I thought could have helped me in the moment that I was in, but he did. And I don't even think he realizes today what that line in that book meant for me. It reminded me of my power.
And is that at the point where you started picking yourself up by your bootstraps?
Yes. I started to realize that, my son didn't need to grow up seeing his mother sad. I didn't want to be unhappy. I knew what a child deserved, and I knew that at least positivity around them, and someone who was excited about life. I was also happy to have another child, and I didn't want to. I just didn't want to be miserable, right? Or look around and realize that there were things that I was doing, and it was truly being unmotivated. And the thing that brought me structure of going to work every day or diving into the projects, those distractions were no longer around. I was sitting with myself and my child at home, and I was like, Jeanette, figure it out. So that's when that drive, right? And I guess you can say power, that drive of I need to do something. And I started reaching out to people I work with. I'm like, hey, do you need help on a project? I remember my first project was writing a bio for a DJ. I was like, yeah, I could do that. And then as I started doing those things slowly, and I think he paid me maybe like $100 to do it. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. We went back and forth, and I realized I was consulting with him. I was giving him advice about his social media. And I was like, okay, you still got it. It's still in your brain. You don't need to be in an office to do what you truly know how to do. I was sitting at my kitchen table and figuring it out.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Because it's like that, in that quietness, in that solitude, that's where the magic is, even though it may be very uncomfortable.
Right.
But if you find yourself making friends with that solitude, oh my goodness, baby, that's a game changer. That just opens up so much, but we just have to know that it is okay to be in that space. And I wanted to piggyback on something that you said earlier, and you alluded to taking full responsibility for your life.
I was gonna circle back to that.
And
I'm like, wait, what did I say?
Something like, what did I fail to do? What did I didn't do? Like you put it introspectively, asking what I didn't do or what I could have done,
as opposed to
what life has done to me. Why why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Why me? And all that kind of
Mhm,
stuff. It's like,
mhm.
what could I have done to change this, or what did I fail to do? Like once you start engaging in those questions, you're engaging in responsibility. Automatically, whether you meant to do it or not, that's what that means. You're already, your mindset is
Taking control
already,
of your,
I'm responsible. So
yeah.
Everything.
what could I, that's great. Yeah. So
I did not know that. I didn't even realize that. I didn't even realize that that is what I was doing. I just kept thinking that it was just me. So how could I have done something differently versus realizing that that was taking responsibility?
That is,
it sounds like what you said, all the figures in your life who had unfortunately passed at a certain time, or maybe not unfortunately in the sense of that everything
Right.
works ways, but I mean, you were like, they had instilled these things in me, and now I was on my own to fend for myself, but they must have instilled them in well, because you just said you were on automatic pilot, like your responsibility was already there,
Right.
ingrained in. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. It was. They did a good job, huh?
they did.
They
Applause.
did. In the short time that they were there.
Yes. And I wanted to ask you about that because I also want to get into your firms. How do you give an authentic voice to your clients? Because even I'm interested because I want to grow our audience base and get our message out there in front of, more people to build the platform. So I want to ask you, what would you suggest about that in a short minute? But I want to ask you, has your mom visited you, or your grandmother or your grandfather? Like, how do they speak to you today?
Um, Funny you should ask. So I'm going to share this story with you and your audience because I know that they would be, and you all would be open to hearing it, right? But I probably wouldn't share with a lot because they probably wouldn't understand. But in 2006, when I left that other agency, I started working for a woman, and we worked on different clients. We worked on people, and someone that we worked with was a tarot reader, a psychic, a medium, and she came into the office. She didn't have a lot of money to pay for her services. So in exchange for her services, she would give each of us a reading. Now, growing up religiously, I was just like, my parents were like, don't do it. Like that's not God. That's not the right thing. You shouldn't do it. But the woman sent us all home the night before she came in, and she said, bring something in with you. And she would then give us each a reading. So she gave me a reading, and when I sat down in front of her, again, I'm just like, here we go. All right, sure, I'll work on this. But she says to me that two women came into the room with me. Yes. She said, two women are here. I was like, here we go. I'm like, really? Well, who are they? And she starts talking to me about things that no one even in the office knew. She said to me that she's like, she said specifically, do you see dimes randomly in different places? And I said, well, I said why? I say, yeah, sometimes I do, but it had happened so much that it was noticeable. All right, that it was something that I made note of, and I'd pick it up. Sometimes I wouldn't because it would be in the street, or and she said, that's your mother. Yeah, that's your mom. She said, your mom is here, and she says that she loves you and she's with you all the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So then I started sobbing uncontrollably. Okay. And then because I remember like being in a nightclub, and like I remember being in a nightclub when I felt like something wasn't safe. And I remember looking down, and on the floor next to me was a dime. So like, it wasn't like this was happening like at home. At home, it was happening, right? But it was happening in the street. It would happen on my lunch break when I was like infuriated by something that happened at work. And then she said, and she told me about the woman's energy, and it was very much my mother. I'd have an asthma attack when I was a child, and she'd call the ambulance, and she wouldn't remember my birthday. And I'm sitting there with the mask on. I'm like, January 20th. I'm like looking at her like, Mom, pull it together. So she described the personality of someone who was very much like who my mother was in 3D form. And then she mentioned that there was another woman there, and she said that this woman she told me her name and I was like, I have no idea who this is. She said, this woman is very happy that you're taking care of her daughter. And I'm like, her daughter, who is she talking about? And she's like, oh, she gives you roses. And long story short is the woman that she had mentioned had died several years before I was born, and I was taking care of an elderly aunt who was bedridden, and we lived in the same house, and while working full time and raising I was taking care of her. She was 84 when she passed away. This is like 11, 12 years now, but at the time she was 78, 79. So to think about it being her mother, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh my gosh. And she said her name, and I was floored. No one in that room, I had never met this woman in person. She passed away 6 years before I was born. And I was like, oh. And that was the first time that something clicked in my mind, that there are other things happening, and being aware of like being guided through life is a reality, and it's something that's possible. But even then, it was more of, now I'm aware of what the change is that I see, random dimes, because it's specifically dimes. And so how they talk to me, I would say it's through different experiences or things that are happening. It's not, no one sits on my bed. Now maybe it is happening, right? But no one's sitting on my bed holding my hand and like, listen, Jeanette, so today you're gonna get up on time, right? Like, but no, it's more of the things that are happening to me in life, and and that is how the messages come to me.
It's funny because on Clubhouse, somebody else was speaking of the same exact thing. They were seeing random dimes. And then they realized, somebody helped them realize that that is their loved one showing up.
Wow.
That is, and it also speaks to, and this is a whole different podcast, but it also speaks to our eternal souls.
Yeah.
Like, drop the physical suit, but we are eternal energy. Like, right, so that's so beautiful to see it show up like that and to show itself to us. We are still very much here.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, we are. I'm still kind of navigating how all of that, but there's no doubt in my mind that that I have loved ones who are still with me and helping me.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
So like what are your current practices with all this stuff coming up that shows you that there's more going on to life, and you know, finding that inner power and the inner voice, you know, along your path? Do you have a current, like, this is what I do daily, gratitude, you know, anything like that?
So always expressing gratitude for sure. And that's also like even just waking up, right? Being extremely thankful for just waking up and surviving. One thing you had mentioned about like my low point, one of my biggest fears while working, which showed up in probably one of the worst ways while being employed at companies, was my fear of not being able to survive and take care of myself, because at 17, it was something I had to figure out. So as I went into any job, I wasn't giving 10%, 15%, I was giving 250% of myself. I was the person who would be the last one to leave work. I was the person who would, who even sacrificed my own physical well-being to show up and make sure that I did the job and got it done. Or even if it was impossible for everyone else, I was going to show how I could get it done. And I was like, no one is going to work as hard as me. And in 2017, when I was unemployed, I realized that was probably one of the craziest things I could have ever said. And like with a sense of pride and like no one's going to work harder than me. And because I was devaluing who I was and giving more of myself. And I realized that it's like 2019 or 2018, when I started my company and it was slowly growing. I realized that despite not having any money or like spending all of and not on like expensive designer, but like food, paying my bills, making sure that I maintain a roof over my head, I realized that I survived. Like it wasn't this like daunting thing that was impossible, and or that I couldn't get over. Like, thinking that because I'm resourceful, right? Or I figured it out, right? I figured it out, and I figured it out without caring about what judgment came along with it, because you have this idea in your mind of how you should show up and what you should have, and none of that mattered when I needed to be faced with how I was going to eat, where I was going to sleep, and how I was going to make it happen. And that then brings me to where I am today: gratitude, right? Like tremendous gratitude. I also realized that in 2017 we weren't dealing with a pandemic, and now what happened to me in 2017 is happening to other people for different reasons. They've lost the matriarch or patriarch in their families. They've lost people, their loved ones, or their jobs, or life just isn't the same, right? It isn't the same. And for some people, it's impacted them even more. And I don't doubt for a moment that feeling that I had then is happening to people now. And they're probably having to figure it out and have no idea how, right? But many don't have the luxury or the time or the resourcefulness that I feel like I had at that moment. And all I could say is just continue to express gratitude, because those things will come. Like I would randomly have an aunt send me a card and say that she was thinking about me and put a $25 check in it. And I remember getting it and being like, she has no idea. She has no idea what this $25 is going to do for me right now. Like it's so simple, but those are the things I'd appreciate. Now, when I was 16 and she sent me a card with $25 in it, I'm just like, $25, like what am I gonna do? But but 20 years later, I'm just like, oh my God, it's a sign, right? It was like a sign that like more was going to come, positive things were going to come. They would show up when you needed them. And there's just so many mysteries about how that's even possible. Or you meet someone randomly on the street, and so you have to gratitude, just like express tremendous gratitude. So I meditate, right? I also pray, and I pray, and just it's always led with thankfulness.
Yeah, because oftentimes I love the fact that you meditate, because I was going to ask you for some tools, but I love the fact that you started off with gratitude, because the more we exercise gratitude, the more universe gives us moments to be grateful for. So like the $25,
Yeah.
that's another reason to, to be grateful for, to have gratitude. So I love that, because the more that we show gratitude, the more reasons we will have to be grateful for, as opposed to the more that we complain, we will have more reasons to complain about.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
aware of your energetic vibration. And okay, I have a little fun game here.
Okay.
We always face fear, right?
Okay.
And so there is 2 acronyms for fear, and I want you to tell me which one you felt that you, the one that you pursued, or the one that resonated with you. So the first acronym is feeling excited and ready. That's the first acronym for fear. The other acronym is false evidence or expectations appearing real.
That's the second one.
Okay.
False. Yeah, that's the second one. False evidence, expectations appearing real. Absolutely. And it resonates with me because just back to like the gratitude point, I think once you become thankful, you then look at you. It's a switch in your brain that turns what your current experience is into a positive. And the same thing about false. I didn't write it down. The second acronym you mentioned about fear, but it being negative about your situation is also a false viewpoint. It's a negative way to think about things, and it's not real, right? Your reality is what you make it, and I think that that is the key to it all. And it starts with gratitude. And people always say, you're supposed to be thankful. And if you haven't truly sat down and thought about what you're thankful for, then you probably wouldn't come to the point where you need to be of pivoting and changing your life. So once you're able to truly appreciate that $25 when you really need $200,000, your life kind of changes, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? So it requires patience as well.
Yeah, we're like total magnets when it comes to living life. You're just pulling and attracting, pulling and attracting. So it's like
this podcast interview. I was like, this interview was, I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I am so happy to be here. Like, you have no idea how happy and thankful I am for this opportunity, because I've been growing and changing, and I'm still me inside. Like, I'm still the same person who shows up and like wants to have fun, but I can't have this conversation with everyone. And I'm learning that. So I'm learning how to help people express gratitude and change their minds as well. And then also when it comes to brands, something that we would always say in corporate or working with any big company is like finding that authentic voice. Or when I have to craft messages for a client and they're conducting an interview, which seems to be impossible for me to do for myself. But you think about what is being authentic. What would you naturally say? What what outlets or what's going to resonate with your target audience? And that to me is the essence of great communications, helping to grow your brand. Because once you're authentic, it's never about, oh, I need to prepare for this thing that I'm going to do and make sure I do it right. You're going to do it right because it's naturally who you are, right? So it's almost like, oh yeah, so you just kind of show up, right? And the people who are going to gravitate to you and connect with that message, once it's authentic, they're going to connect with that message, because it's about like, and like positive energy. You put it out and that's what you get back in return. And it sounds simple. And 20 years ago, I've heard this and I was like, okay, yeah, sure. But then when you truly you find that moment where the light bulb goes off, that is how things will grow.
wow, yes, you definitely nailed it. That truth component is so important. It seems like there's some really basic fundamentals of our life experience, and
Yeah.
is certainly a part of it. And attracting, just what you focus on seems to just be a part of it. So it's like, well, once you realize the game, so to speak,
Right.
it's like fine tuning that, just like, okay, make sure that I show up authentically, because if you're doing the nonsense and BS, attracting the BS-ness.
Yeah.
Nonsense. So it's like you're attracting and always creating with your thoughts, with your words, with your actions. So you might as well get them in alignment with what you want to experience, real for real. And let's get it popping. Let's go.
Right. No, absolutely.
And I think that getting to know you just in this short time, I feel like your clients are in such good hands.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You are very authentic and organic, and you are relatable. So that is what you will bring to their message. You will pull that out of them if they're not quite there yet or don't know how to frame it like that. I think that you are a master at knowing how to message relatable, so that people, they can draw their direct target audience, like you mentioned. Like, I really feel that. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna grab up my coins. I gotta put my coins together.
Find those dimes.
So we're coming to a close, which is kind of bittersweet, but we're definitely going to connect on Clubhouse as well.
Yes.
For the people, Jeanette, out there, for the people who feel lost, or for the people who don't quite have the confidence, what piece of advice, what could you speak to them that would kind of like give them a little boost in their battery, so to speak?
I would say to take a look at the things that are not making them happy. And those are the things that will show them what will make them happy, right? So like, if you are in a place where you are trying to fit in, which I spent a long time in my life looking for acceptance from the wrong people, and not truly realizing who I was. Like, the one thing that I did realize along the way is what I did not want to tolerate, what I would not accept. And it's still a journey. So I by no means are the things that are around me perfect, but I'm grateful for what I do have, and whatever it is that you don't want, the key to what you do want is in the thing that you don't want. So that is a lesson, right? So it's like a negative thing, but the positive side of that is like, nah, I'm not dealing with that, right? Or I'm not doing that, or I'm not gonna allow that thing to happen to me, or feel a certain, I want to be happy. So why are you unhappy? Look at the thing that is making you unhappy, and you want the opposite of that, which is happiness. And sometimes it's not, so black and white, and it's very much gray, because it's about what you want and what you're comfortable with, what you are capable of doing, and based on what you have around you, and just being thankful for it all.
Yeah, that brings it back to that solitude, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome, because not everyone is always so just they know exactly what they're going for. They know what they want, but it is easier to say, well, I know what I don't want. I want,
right. Right.
The process of elimination, and start to at least get yourself in that direction, and then you can start, on what exactly you want to get yourself into. Right. So yeah, awesome advice.
Yeah. Thank you. It doesn't happen overnight. It's definitely a journey. I feel like I've been on mine my entire life, and I'm thankful for where I am right now. And it's not going to be like what it looks like on TV, right? Like having my company. If people for years, like, you should have your own company. I'm like, no. And I would sit in an office building on the 32nd floor of some huge building and think, how would I achieve this, right? Thinking that it had to be on the 32nd floor of a high-rise building in Manhattan. No, it can happen at your kitchen table, and you can make just as much money, right? So it's like the perception, changing that false reality that you had mentioned. All of those things are key.
Yeah. I'll say it for you one more time. False evidence or expectations appearing real. False evidence or expectations.
I'm writing down, definitely, because I love it. Okay. Appearing real, right?
So I'm sure before we close off, we'll give you an opportunity to voice all, just plug yourself, whether it's websites, whether
we can find
all your information. Right before we get into that, I'm just curious about the title of your firm, Excellence and Presence.
Excellence and Presence, yeah.
I was interested in you telling about the presence part of what that name of what the name means.
So it's actually a line from I'm from Brooklyn, so I'm all about Big, Notorious B.I.G. And there was a song that he and Diddy wrote called Victory. In that song, there was a line about excellence and presence. And excellence is my presence, never tense, never hesitant. I then took a look at PR, and essentially we want to execute with excellence, right? In whatever that looks like to you, right? Not what it looks like on TV. And presence is what PR is. It's helping people increase their presence, helping a brand create its awareness. And when that line hit me, it must have been like 2:00 in the morning, and I'm listening to music, and I was like, oh, that's it. So it very much goes in line with, and then presence, just your presence as you walk into a room. It's also like a guiding principle to be aware of it. And whether you think you walk into a room with some sort of presence or not, you actually do. And once you realize it, you just, like, things just change, right? Things just change. Your perception about being nervous and walking into it. I'm still nervous. I'm nervous right now, but I mean, I'm not showing it, right? But you walk into a room and you bring yourself and your attention and your energy with you, and just being aware of that and in every aspect is I think is really important.
So when you become aware of it, that's when you can own it.
Yes, that's when you can own it. That's when you can own it. As opposed to feeling like you need to make yourself smaller, or I don't want to, make too much noise. Be you,
Unapologetically.
I love it. We have a story of persistence and we have a story of being responsible, taking responsibility, just finding your voice, your power in the darkest moments, establishing things with gratitude, being appreciative, and also living with purpose, being purposeful, your presence, knowing what you're doing, being aware of yourself, being aware of who you are. This is a lot of key bullet points right here. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yes, our audience, and we got so much out of this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you brought us back. We're back. We were out of, almost out of retirement. It felt like we were doing so much transitions,
Wow.
A little on COVID, there's a lot of stuff been going on, but we had our own personal transitions too, moving and different things. So we've been doing a lot, and it's like, all right, let's get back. We're back.
That's great. Well, welcome back. I'm really happy to be here. Really, really happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, baby, Brooklyn. Your borough back then. You talking about growing up in the 80s? Oh, yeah. Any party? It's like, where's the party at? Oh, it's in Brooklyn. I'm good on that. I'm going to just
exactly. There are areas I didn't even go to, right? And my neighborhood was quote unquote crime ridden. I mean, it definitely was. But navigating that and surviving that and being so proud of those experiences it's part of who I am, and I would have not have had it any other way.
Yes, awesome. Thank you
Jeanette,
so much.
Thank you so much. And your story, your shares, it just speaks to us of how we are really unstoppable. So thank you so much for that encouragement and just that fire. Like I feel like very fired up right now, like level,
I'm glad.
Thank you so much. And so if you could just tell our audience, how do we find you? Give us your information.
Sure. So I am on, you can find my website is excellencepresence.com. And I'm also on Instagram, and my company, I always have to look at this because someone actually took the name of what I wanted. So it is EX_PR.comms, COMMS. Again, it's EX_PR.comms, and that is my Instagram channel. And also, if you want to email me or interested in, consult about a brand event or building a brand, marketing, social media, feel free to email me, info@excellencepresence.com.
Awesome.
Excellent. And did you say your IG handle?
It's EX_PR.com.
Yeah, she has a in the name. Yeah.
I know, it's the weirdest thing. That's why I always have to look at it so I don't butcher it. Thank you so much.
So much. We're not going to take any more of your time, although we would love to keep you all to ourselves, but we're going to let you go. I know your clients need you. So much, Jeanette. This is so much fun.
Namaste.
Thank you. Same here. Namaste. Take care. Bye-bye.